What if the thing that's quietly draining your strength is something you've always believed was harmless? You're not lazy, you're not broken, but something's been keeping you stuck. You wake up tired even after 8 hours of sleep. You can't focus like you used to. You feel uninspired, flat. You blame stress, work, maybe even your phone, but deep down, you know it's more than that. There's a habit you don't talk about. Not to your friends, not to your mentor, maybe not even to yourself, and yet it follows you. In moments of boredom, anxiety, loneliness, it shows up like an old friend, comforting, predictable, private. But what if that very habit is the reason you feel numb? What if it's not just about pleasure, but about power? What if this small thing is quietly hijacking your confidence, crushing your drive, and rewiring your brain to chase comfort instead of greatness? The truth is, we live in a world designed to keep men weak. We're told that giving in is normal. That indulgence is self-care. That pleasure should never be questioned. But the men who built empires, the ones we quote, admire, follow, they didn't rise by obeying every impulse. They mastered themselves, and because they could say no to fleeting pleasure, they unlocked a life most men will never taste. This isn't about shame. This isn't about purity. This is about reclaiming your edge, your fire, your presence. Because when you stop giving away your energy to things that don't deserve it, you stop apologizing for your power. And the world starts noticing a different version of you, the one you were always meant to become. So if you've ever felt stuck, distracted, disconnected from the man you want to be, stay with me. Because today we're going to talk about masturbation, not the version you've been told is harmless, but the deeper truth behind why it's quietly making you weaker, and how to break free. They told you it was harmless, that it was normal, that every guy does it. You probably heard it from friends in high school, laughed about it in college, and maybe even read articles that called it healthy or a good way to relieve stress. It's packaged as self-care, as freedom, as something natural that men shouldn't feel guilty about. But here's the part they never told you: not all normal things are good for you, and not everything that feels good helps you grow. Let's pause for a second. Think back to the last time you gave in. It wasn't just about physical relief, was it? Maybe it was boredom, loneliness, anxiety. Maybe you were avoiding something, an uncomfortable truth, a goal you've been procrastinating on, or just that low, heavy feeling that comes with not living up to your own potential. I want to tell you a quick story. A client of mine, let's call him James, was in his mid-20s, smart, talented, wanted to start a business, but he could never stick to his plans. Every week he'd make a to-do list full of ambition, and by Friday nothing got done. Why? Not because he lacked skill. Because each night when stress crept in, he'd fall into the same habit, and afterwards he'd feel drained. Not just physically, but mentally. The fire was gone, the edge was dull. It wasn't that he didn't want success. He just didn't have the energy to chase it anymore. And here's what he realized: the real damage wasn't the habit itself. It was the lie he believed, the lie that pleasure is harmless. That indulgence is freedom, that just because something is natural, it can't be dangerous in excess. Here's the truth: when a man loses his edge in silence, he rarely notices it until it's too late. Until he wakes up one day, wondering why nothing excites him anymore, why his goals feel heavier, why his relationships feel flat, why his confidence has quietly disappeared. The lesson: anything that promises quick pleasure without effort is always hiding a cost. And the longer you believe the lie, the more power you give away. But you don't have to stay stuck in that loop. Because once you understand how this habit hijacks your brain's reward system, you'll start seeing the whole pattern differently. And that begins with something deeper than shame or guilt. It starts with understanding the science of dopamine. Let's dive into that next. Let's talk about dopamine, the chemical behind every feel-good moment you've ever had. Every time you eat something sweet, get a like on social media, or win a game, your brain releases dopamine. It's the reason you feel motivated. It's your reward signal. It says, hey, that felt good. Let's do it again. But here's the twist. The more you chase that feeling, especially through artificial means like porn or mindless masturbation, the more your brain adapts, and not in a good way. See, your brain isn't built for the flood of pleasure we're exposed to today. So when you keep spiking dopamine through instant gratification without earning it, your brain begins to lower its sensitivity. It's like turning the volume down after blasting loud music all day. Soon, nothing feels loud enough. Nothing excites you. That's why men who get caught in this habit often say things like, "I just don't feel motivated anymore. Life feels flat, like something's missing. Even when I win, I don't feel it." I once spoke to a young man, early 30s, high-income job, no kids, no debt. From the outside, he had it all. But he told me, "I feel like a ghost in my own life." He wasn't depressed, he just didn't feel much at all. He admitted to watching porn almost daily. Not because he was addicted to sex, but because it became a ritual, a way to feel something. But over time, it made everything else feel less. Here's what's really happening. Every dopamine hit without real effort, without challenge or meaning, trains your brain to crave shortcuts. And that craving becomes your new normal. Why go to the gym when you can feel good in seconds? Why work on a business when your brain can get rewarded without risk? And over time, the things that once made you feel alive, adventure, deep work, even intimacy, start to fade into the background. The scary part: most guys don't even realize it's happening. They just think they've lost their edge, that they're tired or unmotivated. But the truth is, their reward system has been hijacked. The good news: your brain is plastic. It can change, it can heal. But that healing starts with awareness, and it deepens when you understand what ancient thinkers, Stoics like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, already knew long before dopamine had a name. They didn't have brain scans, but they had wisdom. And in the next part, we'll explore what they taught about desire, discipline, and the invisible war happening inside every man. Centuries before the word dopamine existed, the Stoics already understood what most modern men still ignore: the man who cannot control his desires is not free. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is a slave to his body." Marcus Aurelius echoed, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." To the Stoics, self-mastery wasn't just a virtue. It was the foundation of masculine identity, and for good reason. Because every time you give in to a fleeting urge, whether it's porn, junk food, or emotional outbursts, you're reinforcing a silent message: I am not in charge. And the more often you say that to yourself, the more you start to believe it. Let me tell you about someone I coached a while back, Derek. Derek was disciplined on the surface. Gym every day, clean diet, focused on his career. But he had one habit he couldn't shake: late night scrolling, leading to porn, leading to regret. Not every night, just often enough to eat away at his confidence. The strange part: it wasn't the act that broke him, it was the loss of integrity. He told me, "I can deadlift 400 pounds, but I can't keep a promise to myself alone in my room at midnight." And that's what hit hardest. Because self-respect isn't built in public. It's built in silence, when no one's watching. It's built every time you say no to the easy thing, and yes to the man you're trying to become. That's what the Stoics meant. They weren't against pleasure, they were against being ruled by it. They knew that freedom wasn't about doing whatever you feel like. It was about having the strength to do what's right, even when your feelings beg you not to. So many men today are chasing confidence through external things: money, status, validation. But true confidence comes from this quiet kind of self-control. The ability to look at temptation and say, "Not today. I answer to something higher." That's not weakness, that's power. And when you feel that power even once, it changes you. Because suddenly you're no longer reacting to life. You're choosing it. But willpower alone won't get you there. You need a system, something to replace the old habit with a deeper, stronger force. Something that channels that same energy into purpose. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. There's a reason every major spiritual tradition, Every great warrior culture and every wise philosopher throughout history emphasized mastery over desire, not to suppress energy, but to redirect it. The Stoics didn't believe in killing off your impulses. They believed in transforming them. That's where the idea of transmutation comes in, turning sexual energy into creative, productive, and life-giving force. You've felt that energy before. It's primal, intense. It shows up in your chest, your gut, your focus. The problem isn't the energy itself. It's where you send it. Think of it like fire. In a fireplace, it warms the home. Out of control and everything to the ground. Sexual energy is the same. Let me tell you about Nathan. He wasn't religious. Didn't talk about chakras or spiritual energy, but he was building a company and struggling to stay motivated. Each night he'd fall back into old habits, scrolling, porn, then sleep. His days felt foggy, uninspired. Until one month, he decided to stop, just as an experiment. But instead of just quitting, he replaced the ritual. Every time the urge came, he wrote. Sometimes it was journaling, sometimes a business plan. Other nights he went for a late walk or hit the gym. And what shocked him was this: the energy didn't disappear, it multiplied. He said, "It's like I had a second battery I didn't know existed." That's the hidden power of transmutation. You don't lose the fire, you reassign it. Artists, athletes, monks, CEOs, they've all talked about this. Even Nikola Tesla, one of the greatest inventors in history, stayed celibate. Not because he feared sex, but because he understood that focus, creativity, and genius often come from a disciplined relationship with energy. And here's the real lesson: if you don't give your energy a direction, it will find its own, and usually not one that serves you. So instead of fighting lust, what if you trained it? What if you turned it into discipline, drive, and hunger for something bigger? Every man has that ability, but most never activate it because they've never tried replacing pleasure with purpose. And that's exactly what we'll talk about next. Not just how to control desire, but how to anchor it to something that pulls you forward every single day. Something bigger than habit, something called purpose. There's a reason so many men fall into the same loop: boredom, urge, release, guilt, numbness, repeat. And the reason isn't just lack of discipline, it's lack of direction. Because when a man doesn't have a clear purpose, something that stretches him, challenges him, calls him to rise, he becomes vulnerable to every quick fix that promises instant relief. Let me put it simply: when your life is empty of meaning, pleasure becomes your only reward. That's why quitting a habit like porn or masturbation isn't just about saying no. It's about having something worth saying yes to. I remember coaching a guy named Louise, mid-20s, talented, wanted to build a podcast but kept delaying it. Every time he sat down to work, he'd feel overwhelmed and fall back into his old pattern. He thought he had a discipline problem, but what he really had was a clarity problem. So I asked him, if you were fully energized, no guilt, no distractions, what would you be building? And he said, something that helps men like me feel less lost. That was it. That one sentence lit something in him. He created a schedule, bought a mic, started recording. The urges didn't vanish overnight, but now he had something to fight for, and with each episode he published, the desire to escape got quieter. That's the power of purpose. It gives your energy a target. It replaces dopamine loops with deep, earned satisfaction. It anchors you when the cravings come back, because they will. And purpose doesn't have to be grand. It could be building a brand, learning a skill, taking care of your body, leading your family with presence. Whatever makes you feel needed, challenged, and alive. The Stoics believed that without purpose, a man drifts. That drift leads to indulgence, and indulgence leads to regret. But when you find something bigger than your impulses, something that wakes you up excited and keeps you up focused, you stop looking for pleasure. Because you've found meaning, and that meaning becomes your shield. Now here's the next step. Even with purpose, most men still fall because they try to fight temptation with raw willpower. But willpower alone isn't enough. What you need is a system, and that's where we're going next. Let's clear up one of the biggest myths holding men back, the idea that willpower alone is enough. We love stories about grit, about pushing through, about mental toughness. And yes, discipline matters. But here's the truth most people won't say out loud: willpower is like a battery. It drains. It fades. It fails, especially when you're tired, stressed, or emotionally off center. If you've ever promised yourself, "This is the last time," only to fall back into the same habit a few days later, you know exactly what I mean. You're not weak. You're just fighting an invisible war with the wrong weapon. Let me share a story about Matt. Matt was a software engineer. Brilliant guy, very logical. He set reminders, blocked websites, tracked habits. But every few days, late at night, the urge came back. He'd resist for a while. But then he'd say, "Just this once." And after, he'd feel defeated. Not because of the act, but because he broke a promise to himself. Again. Here's what changed everything for him. He stopped trying to use willpower to fight the urge, and started using structure to avoid the urge. Instead of just saying no every night, he changed the environment that triggered him. No phone in bed, no internet after 10 p.m., cold showers, evening workouts. He built a system that removed the decision-making moment altogether. Because the most disciplined people, they don't rely on willpower 247. They design lives where discipline is easier than indulgence. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't debate it, you just do it. Why? Because it's wired into your routine. That's the key. Your brain loves efficiency. And if the fastest path to dopamine is right in front of you, it will take it, unless you've placed something stronger in the way. The Stoics had their own version of this. They called it premeditatio malorum, visualizing temptation in advance, preparing for it, building resilience before the moment came. The lesson: stop relying on brute force. Start building better fences around your focus. And part of that fence is knowing what triggers you, what invisible cues pull you back into the loop. That's what we'll explore next: how to recognize and neutralize your hidden triggers before they take the wheel. Most men think they fail in the moment of temptation, but the truth is, they were already set up to fail hours before. Because by the time you feel the urge, it's often too late. What really pulls you back into the loop isn't just lust. It's triggers, the invisible cues around you that quietly activate the craving. Sometimes it's obvious: a suggestive image, a late-night scroll, a scene in a show. But most triggers are subtle. It's the stress after a long day, the loneliness when everyone else is out, that little voice that says, "You deserve a break." And when those cues repeat often enough, your brain builds an automatic loop: trigger, urge, action, reward, regret. Let me introduce you to Josh. Josh didn't think he had a problem. He only slipped once or twice a week. But he noticed something strange. It always happened after phone calls with his boss. Those calls made him feel inadequate, even if nothing bad was said. And afterward, he wanted to feel powerful again, in control, safe. That was his trigger. Once he saw that pattern, everything changed. He started journaling after the calls instead. He called a friend, he lifted weights, and slowly, the loop began to weaken. Because once you name the trigger, you take its power away. Here's a practical step: start a trigger log. Each time you feel the pull, write down what just happened. Where are you? What are you feeling? Do this for 7 days. You'll start seeing patterns you never noticed before. And once you identify your top 3 triggers, don't just try to resist them, replace them. Create rituals: stress, cold shower, lonely, call someone, late night urge, read fiction, stretch, or go for a short walk. Triggers lose power when you stop letting them lead you. The Stoics taught this too. They believed that awareness of your inner state is the first step to mastery. That you can't control what you don't see. And here's the deeper lessons. You're not broken because you have triggers. You're human. But when you learn to recognize the chain reaction before it starts, you step out of reactivity and into conscious choice. And now that you've seen the patterns, it's time to explore what happens when you break free from them. Because what's waiting on the other side of control isn't just stillness, it's real strength, and we'll go there next. There's a kind of strength that isn't loud. It doesn't flex. It doesn't need applause. It's the quiet power a man builds when he starts keeping promises to himself, especially when no one is watching. That kind of strength, it's forged in silence, not in the gym, not on stage, but in those everyday moments when no one would blame you for giving in and you choose not to. Because every time you resist an old pattern, every time you step away from a screen, from a craving, from a shortcut, you're not just saying no to a habit. You're saying yes to the man you want to become. Let me tell you about Tyler. Tyler wasn't the alpha type. He wasn't chasing six-pack abs or shouting about discipline. He was soft-spoken, kind. But for years he battled shame, always falling back into old habits when things got hard. Porn, masturbation, endless scrolling. And every time he'd think, maybe I'm just not meant to be strong. But then something shifted. He stopped trying to go 90 days. He stopped chasing perfection. And he started with just one promise: no more lies to myself. He made it through one night, then two. Not perfect, but consistent. And slowly something new showed up. He looked people in the eye more. He stopped apologizing for existing. He spoke with more certainty, not arrogance, but grounded presence. That's the kind of masculinity the world rarely talks about. Not the loud, performative kind, but the kind rooted in restraint, clarity, and earned self-respect. You see, when you stop leaking your energy into dead-end habits, it returns to you in ways you didn't expect: more confidence in conversations, more focus in your craft, more gravity when you walk into a room. Because there's a calm that comes from knowing you are not ruled by your urges. The Stoics called it ataraxia, a quiet inner stability. Not the absence of desire, but the presence of control. And here's the truth most men never hear: masculinity isn't built by domination. It's built by discipline, by delayed gratification, by holding the line when no one's there to cheer you on. That's how you stop being a boy who reacts and become a man who chooses. And when you start tasting that kind of presence, you'll never want to go back. Because what's waiting on the other side of temptation is a life where you don't just look strong, you are. But that choice, it begins with a final decision. Will you keep giving your power away, or will you rise once and for all? Let's finish this. At some point, every man arrives at a quiet crossroad. No spotlight, no applause. Just a moment, maybe late at night, maybe after another relapse, where he looks at himself in the mirror and thinks, is this who I want to be? It's not a dramatic movie scene. It's usually quiet, simple. But in that moment, a decision is made, whether he realizes it or not. Will I keep letting this habit run my life, or will I take it back? There's no judgment here. We've all made choices we're not proud of. But masculinity isn't about being flawless. It's about being honest and taking responsibility for your direction, even if you've drifted. Let me tell you about Kevin. Kevin had tried to quit dozens of times. Books, blockers, cold showers, you name it. But nothing worked until he changed one thing's his identity. He stopped thinking, I'm trying to quit, and started thinking, I'm the kind of man who doesn't need this anymore. He started acting like the man he wanted to become, not perfectly, but intentionally. And slowly, the urge stopped feeling like a fight. It felt like a test, and he knew the answers. That's the choice you have now. Because every day you wake up, you're casting a vote for weakness or strength, a vote for short-term relief or long-term power, a vote for being ruled or for ruling yourself. The Stoics never said the path would be easy, but they promised it would be worth it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. So here's the right thing. Right now, forgive yourself for the past. Choose differently today. Build the systems. Keep the promises. And when you fall, don't spiral, stand up faster. Because real kings aren't perfect. They're just relentless. And you have a decision to make. Will you stay stuck in this cycle, quietly losing pieces of yourself day by day? Or will you rise? Will you reclaim your fire, your clarity, your masculinity, not just for you, but for everyone who depends on your strength? If you're ready, then this is your moment. Close the tab, take the first step, and never look back. Because your journey to freedom doesn't begin when you feel ready. It begins when you decide you were never meant to be a slave.